This case focuses on a South Korean TikTok influencer and aspiring actress named Yoon Ji-ah. She amassed a large audience of several 100,000 followers and found herself in talks with a supposed wealthy businessman who was also a major supporter of hers. Suddenly, after a routine live stream, Yoon went missing only to later be found stuffed inside a suitcase discovered on a remote mountainside over 300 kilometers from her last known location. At the time of her death, Yoon was just 24 years old. From the start of her online journey, she had the intention of building an audience to usher herself into acting. Her short-form videos and live streams functioned both as content for her audience and as an informal portfolio for casting directors in a highly competitive industry. She posted typical influencer videos, including outings, fashion, and lighthearted commentary. According to accounts from her parents, she was actively auditioning for roles in television dramas and movies, taking smaller parts and bit roles while steadily working toward a breakthrough. Beyond work, Yoon was known to dote on her 3 cats, Gu, Yeppy, and Tori. She maintained strong ties with her parents, and her father was particularly supportive of his daughter's content creation career, regularly leaving encouraging comments on her live streams. This close relationship would later prove crucial in the investigation when he immediately recognized that something was wrong after she failed to respond to his messages, behavior completely out of character for his daughter. The suspect, identified publicly only by the surname Choi, was a man in his 50s who operated under the online alias Black Cat. He meticulously constructed an elaborate facade as a successful CEO of an IT company, presenting himself as someone of substantial wealth and status. Choi leveraged South Korea's live streaming platform ranking system to establish credibility and access. On platforms like Africa TV and TikTok Live, viewers can purchase virtual gifts for streamers, with their spending level determining their rank and status within the community. Choi had reached level 46, with some sources reporting an even higher level. This tier required spending anywhere from $68,000 to $75,000 US. To reach a level 50, the maximum rank would require spending over $110,000. This massive financial decision earned Choi VIP status among Yoon's supporters and positioned him as a figure of influence within the live streaming ecosystem. Many described him as royalty in the social media world. However, this was nothing more than a facade. The truth about Choi's financial situation was devastatingly different from the image he created. In reality, he was drowning in enormous debt, having borrowed hundreds of millions of Korean won using his family home as collateral. His financial desperation extended to converting his family's long-term lease into a monthly rental contract without his father's knowledge, pocketing approximately 800,000 won, which is about $550, that he then failed to pay for months. The immense amount of money he had spent on Yoon's streams was not evidence of wealth. It was evidence of compulsive, reckless spending financed entirely through borrowed money from loan sharks and mortgages he could not repay. Behind the glamorous VIP reputation was a man suffocating under catastrophic economic pressure, using digital platforms to create an illusion of success while his real life crumbled. Eventually, after donating a significant sum of money to Yoon, he obtained an amount of trust from the streamer and approached her with a business proposal. This is where he formally introduced himself as the president of an IT company with extensive knowledge of the TikTok and live streaming market. He claimed to possess proprietary insights into platform algorithms, audience psychology, and growth strategies that could exponentially increase her subscriber base and visibility. For a young creator desperately seeking to transition her social media success into acting opportunities, this proposition must have felt like destiny falling into place. The business arrangement Choi proposed followed what appeared to be industry standard. He would guide her content strategy, optimize her streaming schedule, manage her online presence, and leverage his supposed industry connections, all in exchange for a percentage of her profits. Multiple sources indicate this was presented as a formal management relationship where he would function as her talent manager and business partner. The arrangement promised to professionalize her content creation and allow her to take that next step to her ultimate goal. Critically, Choi's reputation in the social media industry appeared legitimate at first glance. Other influencers who came forward after Yoon's death revealed that Choi had approached them with similar offers, presenting himself as someone who had successfully nurtured small creators into rising stars. He could apparently point to a verifiable track record of helping influencers grow their channels, which lent credibility to his claims. When Yoon's agency conducted due diligence, they found his credentials convincing enough to approve the partnership arrangement. This approval from her professional agency was particularly significant. In South Korea's influencer economy, agencies function as intermediaries between creators and the business world, theoretically providing protection and professional oversight. The fact that trained professionals reviewed the proposal and gave their blessing would have reassured Yoon that this was a legitimate opportunity rather than a predatory scheme. So she subsequently signed an exclusive contract, believing this was her breakthrough moment. Once the partnership was formalized, Choi's behavior began its gradual but unmistakable shift from simple guidance to invasive control. The transition was subtle enough that each individual demand seemed potentially reasonable when viewed in isolation, but collectively it was clearly oppressive. Initially, Choi's instructions aligned with conventional growth strategies for live streamers. He wanted Yoon to broadcast more frequently, for longer durations, and at strategically varied times to capture international audiences across different time zones. The logic he presented was sound, so Yoon complied with these initial requests. What began as manageable daytime broadcasts of perhaps 2 to 3 hours progressively stretched into marathon streaming sessions that consumed Yoon's entire life. According to detailed accounts from Yoon's friends and analysis of her streaming patterns, she eventually found herself conducting 6-hour live streams daily with only minimal 30-minute breaks in between. But even this grueling schedule was just the tip of the iceberg. Reports indicate that these sessions gradually increased further, with Yoon sometimes streaming for 12 continuous hours as Choi pushed for more and more content. Multiple sources emphasize that this escalation did not reflect Yoon's desires or creative vision. It was entirely driven by Choi's coercive demands. He insisted that this relentless schedule was, quote, the only way to gain a lot of following and money. The physical and emotional toll on Yoon became increasingly visible to those around her. Friends noticed changes in her demeanor. The bright, bubbly energy that had made her stream so appealing was being ground down by relentless work that left no space for rest, recovery, or personal life. As time passed, Choi's control extended far beyond simply dictating when and how long Yoon should stream. He implemented a system of constant surveillance and real-time criticism that transformed her broadcast from creative expression into performances under perpetual scrutiny. Choi would watch every second of Yoon's live streams and provide immediate commentary, critique, and instructions. He demanded that she not look at the screen while singing, not focus on any single viewer for too long, modify her vocal performance when he deemed her singing inadequate, limit how much she responded to audience questions, smile on specific cues, and follow countless other micro-directives about her presentation and behavior. When Yoon failed to follow his instructions precisely, or when she tried to voice her own opinion, Choi would reportedly burst out in rage. The financial structure of their arrangement compounded Yoon's sense of obligation. As mentioned, Choi took approximately 20% of all revenue Yoon generated, whether from donations, sponsorships, or any other income streams. This meant that he had a direct financial stake in her productivity, which he used to justify his intensive involvement. But it also meant that Yoon's income was tied to maintaining this relationship, creating economic pressure to tolerate behavior that was clearly crossing boundaries. On one occasion, when Yoon met a friend for coffee during what should have been her personal off time, her phone suddenly began vibrating non-stop as it displayed over 30 messages from Choi. He had been watching her location on a tracking app and saw her at a cafe rather than at home or conducting work activities. The messages would consist of questions and demands, such as telling Yoon to turn her location back on, who she was out with, and what they were discussing. When Yoon questioned Choi on the overwhelming amount of surveillance and stated that it was crossing boundaries, Choi would manipulate the situation back onto Yoon. He would respond with guilt-inducing statements. One such statement said, "I'm spending all my time out of my day to care about you and your career. I watch 12 hours of your streams to make sure you succeed. Why are you not understanding where I'm coming from?" By early September 2025, Yoon was in the midst of connecting the dots and suspecting that she was perhaps being taken advantage of. To compound on this suspicion, Choi's fabricated image was beginning to show cracks and inconsistencies, ultimately leading to Yoon finding out that he was a fraud drowning in personal debt. Armed with the knowledge of Choi's true circumstances and exhausted from months of increasingly oppressive control, Yoon decided to end their partnership completely. Obviously, Choi did not handle this well. Not only did he view his time as now having been wasted, but the $70,000 he had donated to gain Yoon's trust was now fruitless. But beyond the financial issues, Choi appeared to have developed an obsessive psychological attachment to Yoon that went far beyond any professional relationship. On September 10th, 2025, surveillance footage from near Yoon's apartment building recorded a disturbing encounter. The footage begins with Yoon visible on the ground floor area of her apartment building. Choi was seen approaching her, causing Yoon to instinctively step away from him in fear. The man then fell to his knees, his body language appearing frantic and panicked, desperately pleading with Yoon to reconsider her decision to end their partnership. But Yoon stood firm. The footage shows her shaking her head, refusing his pleas, and maintaining her decision. In that moment, Choi's demeanor shifted. Multiple accounts described that after Yoon refused his begging, Choi suddenly became aggressive. He reached out and snatched Yoon's phone out of her hands, attempting to intimidate her. He then talked to Yoon for an extended period after taking her phone. Reports indicate that Yoon tried to leave the situation but found herself unable to do so. Eventually, Choi left, but the situation would escalate the very next day on September 11th as Choi's home was seized and sold through auction after being used as collateral. That same afternoon, around 3 p.m., Yoon had just completed a live stream in Incheon. Little did she know, this was going to be her final broadcast. Viewers watching her saw nothing unusual. Yoon smiled at the camera, interacted with her fans in her bubbly manner, and conducted herself exactly as she had in hundreds of previous streams. The exact events leading up to this moment are a bit unclear, but at approximately 3:27 p.m., surveillance cameras captured Yoon inside Choi's vehicle. The two seemed to be having an argument, which led to Yoon attempting to escape the car. However, she never made it out as Choi was forcibly pulling her back into the vehicle. The door was then slammed shut with Yoon trapped inside. Away from the cameras in the confined space of his vehicle, Choi unleashed a brutal assault on Yoon. Forensic examination revealed that she suffered severe injuries to her face. The beating was so intense that one source described her facial injuries as leaving her severely deformed. Her torso and limbs were also covered in purple and blue bruises. Additionally, autopsy findings revealed that Yoon had cracked ribs from the attack. One source reported that CT scans and autopsy examination found multiple bone fractures in her collarbone and that her abdomen was filled with blood. In fact, approximately 80% of her total blood volume had accumulated there from internal hemorrhaging caused by the attack. Investigators were also able to find skin under her fingernails, indicating that she had scratched and clawed at her attacker in a desperate attempt to survive. After beating Yoon into submission, Choi proceeded to strangle her. The official cause of death was confirmed through autopsy as asphyxiation due to neck compression. With Yoon dead, Choi's focus shifted to concealing the body. Before committing the crime, he had brought along a large suitcase. After the murder, Choi drove back to his former home in Seoul. Witnesses reported seeing him at his residence dragging a large suitcase from the building. He loaded the suitcase into his vehicle and departed, beginning a journey that would take him deep into the rural mountains. With Yoon stuffed inside the suitcase, Choi drove to Muju County in North Jeolla Province, a remote area over 180 miles from where Yoon was last seen alive. The location was chosen specifically because it was quiet, rural, and was only ever visited by the occasional hiker. The journey took more than 3 hours. In an effort to confuse investigators and create false trails, Choi made 8 separate stops along the route. These stops were deliberate attempts to confuse the timeline and mislead investigators by creating a zigzagging pattern across the country. He pulled over in towns, changed direction, and paused along highways, anything to throw authorities off his track. While Choi believed he was outsmarting the system, he was actually making himself appear significantly more suspicious and creating a detailed digital trail. By nightfall or early morning on September 12th, Choi reached a secluded part of the mountainside in Muju. Under the cover of darkness, he dragged the suitcase from the road, opened it, and dumped Yoon's body into the grass on the mountainside. When Yoon failed to return home that evening and didn't respond to messages for 7 hours, her father's concern escalated to alarm. He called her again with no response, then reported her missing to police at 4:22 a.m. on September 12th. Her parents immediately drove to Yeongjong Island, where she had conducted her final live stream to search for their daughter. When they couldn't locate her, they remained in close contact with authorities. During the investigation, officials reviewed the footage of Choi dragging Yoon into his vehicle during the murder. They were able to trace Choi's sporadic route leading all the way to the mountains, and it was there that they ultimately discovered Yoon's remains at 5 a.m. on September 13th. Even more interesting was their second discovery. About 50 meters away from the remains, there was a vehicle stuck in a ditch. This vehicle belonged to Choi, and in fact, he was still nearby attempting to free his car. Investigators approached Choi asking for identification, causing him to panic and attempt to flee. Initially, Choi proclaimed his innocence, saying, "We argued and then parted ways." He denied all charges when first taken into custody. However, police possessed overwhelming evidence. This included hours of surveillance footage, 8 separate witnesses, his vehicle, and his physical presence mere meters from the body. When investigators informed Choi that they had found Yoon's body, he completely broke down. He collapsed emotionally and confessed on the spot to the murder. One of the most infuriating revelations in this case was that Choi had a documented history of violence against women, specifically targeting female content creators. According to multiple reports, in December 2023, just 9 months before he killed Yoon, Choi had been investigated for assaulting and unlawfully confining another woman who was active on TikTok. He employed the same tactics to gain that creator's trust as he did with Yoon. At the time of Yoon's murder in September 2025, Choi was actively on trial without detention for the December 2023 assault and confinement charges. And of course, it was in this window of freedom after posting bail in which he hurt another victim. This revelation sparked massive public outrage throughout South Korea and internationally. Many argued that the system had catastrophically failed to protect Yoon. If proper restrictions, monitoring, or detention had been imposed after his first documented offense, Yoon might still be alive. As of today, specific information about Choi's trial verdict and final sentencing has not been publicly disclosed in available sources. While his trial was described as ongoing in late 2025, it is speculated that Choi will receive a long and severe sentence. The case generated massive public attention throughout South Korea and internationally. News outlets called Choi the Black Cat Killer and described him as a man who pretended to be a guardian angel while slowly tightening the noose around a victim's life. The hashtags Justice for Yoon and Influencer Safety trended across major platforms. Yoon's family posted a heartbreaking tribute on her TikTok account on September 20th, 2025. They said, "Our precious daughter has left this world and our hearts are broken beyond repair. She was a gentle sunrise, warming the coldest mornings. She was laughter carried on the wind and the quiet comfort in a crowded room. She loved bread, reached out to every soul she met, cherished her family, and filled even ordinary moments with light." Her father told reporters he still cannot sleep and continues to hear his daughter's voice asking him to get justice for her.